Can
Let me do welcome once again to the AK Pallav Show, where we bring inspirational immigration stories of immigrants or expats to life. Today, it's actually, I think, one of the most unique profiles that we've had so far on the show. We have someone who has just come from the back of launching a brand new round of their fund in the construction tech space, which we will get into that later. But before becoming a venture capitalist, he's not just been in that space, but he's been on frontline sales. He's been in corporate strategy. He's also been an investment banker, consultant, and it seems, when I was talking to him earlier about it, like it seems like he's taken quite a twisted journey to it. So that'll be really interesting to hear from him about how exactly he landed there. And also, other than that, I remember him mentioning that when while he was in India, he was moving multiple states every few years. So I'm actually kind of curious to hear from him how many languages did he end up knowing as part of that process. But yes, very warm welcome to Vivin, who's currently based out of San Francisco, and it's our pleasure to have him on the show. Vivin, welcome, and once again, congratulations for the launch of your new fund.
yes, it's been an interesting journey. Also, I've basically done things as they've approached me. It's more to give you a little bit of background. Vivin Hegde, I'm a general partner at an early stage construction tech focused fund called Zacua Ventures. So we invest in startups from the pre-seed to A stage, which are in the built environment. So anything that transforms the world around us. So you think about infrastructure, you think about residential, commercial, but anything that helps us decarbonize our environment, or like new materials, circular economy, anything that helps us automate some of these things. For example, bringing robotics into construction, or things like digitization of your workflows, and anything that helps us urbanize. So new infrastructure, affordable housing, new supply chains, EV infrastructure, solar infrastructure. So if you think about some of the most pressing issues that face the world today in terms of climate change and affordable housing and infrastructure creation and resiliency, the built environment is uh, contributing to a lot of these. So solving those problems is something we are trying to do. Very early in the process, so we still have a long way to go, but that's what Zacua does. Personally, as you said, born and brought up in India, grew up there, and I'll probably start with your last question first. How many languages do I know? I speak four or five, actually. I can speak five. Have some understanding of few others. So, for example, Kannada, Tulu, English, Hindi, a little bit of Tamil. And a lot of it comes from my upbringing and being in a retail bank. And it so happens that usually these transfers fluctuate between North India and South India. So it's like I was born when my dad was in Bihar, then went from there to Mysore, to Kanpur, to then Trivandrum, and then Hassan, and then I studied in like Calcutta and back in Bangalore as well. So all over the place. I've lived in Delhi, Chennai, Mumbai. So it's been a great experience of learning different cultures in India. So it shows you the richness of India. It also showcases all the different cuisines, which I really enjoy my food around the country as well. So that was me growing up, right? And as you grow up in India, you either become a doctor or you become an engineer, at least back in my days. Those are the two options that are presented in front of you. I went on to become a mechanical engineer. And then at the end of it, I was about to join a construction firm, but I was like, I'm not ready. I really want to study more. I don't feel like working anymore. And I was indecisive as always. So I was like, I wrote CAT, I wrote GRE, I wrote GMAT. I wrote GMAT. I didn't write because I didn't have time. Uh, and then got called into IIM. So I was like, okay, I can study for 2 more years. I ended up going to IIM Calcutta. So okay, that's how I'm 2007 batch. So that's when I went there. And finance being something that I was very interested in. I was a finance and economics major. So everybody on campus thought I was going to be an investment banker because I also went to Deutsche Bank. I was trading super exotics, and that was super fun, right? It was like, but all they spoke was Greek and Latin, right? So walls and deltas and all of that. Intellectually super stimulating, but sitting in front of a screen all the time. And then what happened is I was the placement coordinator in campus, and I was managing relationships with all of these major companies, McKinsey, BCG, Bain, all of that. I got to know them better, and I was like, it's worthwhile at least applying for that. I think there's no harm in doing that. And then got this offer from McKinsey. I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. So this is where I want to be. I like the people who are here, and ended up joining there and started my career in India after that. So and being a mechanical engineer, there's a client request saying, hey, we need mechanical engineers on this project. So I was then bucketed as an industrials guy. So, and part of the reason I joined McKinsey was to do this interesting projects in India. Like McKinsey had different ideas, right? After my first project, the next project was in Africa. They're like, go to Africa, work on this copper mine. And it was meant to be a 4-month project, ended up being more than 12 months actually. And it
Oh,
was
wow.
probably the best year of my McKinsey life, right? It was a young guy learning the business, almost running the mine, but more importantly, also getting to go to safari. So I was like, that was the year when I went to Serengeti, Luangwa, Ngorongoro, all of these nice spots. So, and that's why both professionally and personally, that was one of my best years. Came back to India, and McKinsey wouldn't let me stay in India, so they sent me to Jakarta for a year. I was like doing some transformation projects in Jakarta. And by then I had the travel bug, right? So I finished about a year stint there, came back to India, and then asked for a transfer to the Chicago office. So moved there. And that was like the first true long-term experience, because even though I'd lived in London for 3-4 months, this was like the first true uh, resettling kind of experience where you're building your own base. Even though Africa was still protected, you're on client campus. Indonesia was still, you're coming back every 3 weeks, but this was a proper relocation where building roots. And by then I'd also got married, so you start to build a community around you and so on and so forth. So it was, you get a taste of what different environments are, and I enjoyed what I was looking at in Chicago. And then eventually came back to India for a short stint. But by this time, I'd spent 6+ years in McKinsey, and I was like, now I want to do something on my own. It's great to consult people, but it's also good to run your own books. It's good to own some of these and drive these forward, right? And at this time, Hilti approached me. And Hilti is a construction tools and materials company. The thing I was looking at my new job is I wanted it to be global. I wanted it to be in an industrial space. I preferably wanted it to be a private company because I didn't want to be chasing quarterly targets. I wanted someone with slightly long-term thinking. And I wanted someone to look after the growth trajectory. So Hilti catered to all of this, and the board was half ex-consultant. So I was like, okay, they know how to deal with people who have this profile, and ended up joining, moved to Switzerland, and that was my next step in my journey. At Hilti, I spent about 8-9 years, and I started in corporate development, looking at strategy efforts in different regions, expansions, and so on. But then I wanted to really understand the product. I wanted to understand the sales. So I came to the US with Hilti and started a frontline sales job. And my wife was like, you've gone from consulting CEOs to selling tools on job sites. It's like usually trajectories goes like this. Your trajectory seemed like you've gone right from the top to the bottom. I was like, no, this is more for understanding, building credibility. And if you don't really do this, you don't earn your stripes, right? So I literally used to go to the job sites with my red Hilti van, take these tools and sell it to people on the job sites. First week was frightening. I've never done frontline sales, right? And there are times when I got thrown out of sites because you're not supposed to be here. What are you doing? You don't know workflow. So, but it was a super learning experience. It taught me a lot. I went on to manage the region. I was a sales manager there as well. So the 2-3 years of doing sales was like fantastic. And at this point in time, the company also started thinking about, okay, how do we start thinking about innovation and engaging with startup ecosystem? And because I'd been in corporate strategy, I had the exposure with McKinsey, I had the financial background, they wanted someone who's both trusted by the organization and is able to build this network externally. So me and another colleague went and started building this. And my first question to my board was, what exactly do you want me to do? So they're like, this is a blank sheet of paper and you have 2 years, figure it out. If you don't figure it out, we'll find you something else. Was basically the statement that they made. And everything from writing my own role description to defining targets to saying, okay, how the ecosystem should work, how we should do the priorities. And uh, it was like building a startup, because we are like on an island by ourselves, creating something that nobody has context. So we had to talk to a lot of external people and internal people, because it's about building the external brand, but also building internal processes. And as we went on doing this was transformative for the company, because we started so many new business units based on the activity we did in robotics and exoskeletons and software. So it changed the direction of the company in terms of some of the key strategic initiatives. Some of these activities on innovation, but they struggle to do it. So it is frustrating to go through the bureaucracy sometimes. Culture change is very, very hard, and companies get in the way of themselves. So we are like, there has to be an easier way of doing this when something is so impactful. Zacua was born as the result of that, saying, okay, uh, in construction, there's a lot of appetite for innovation, but corporates don't really do it very well. Startups, on the other hand, want access to this innovation, and they want access to workflows and all of that, and they have no ways of getting it. So Zacua was built as a bridge between the two. So I'll pause here. I've been going on a monologue for a while, but I'll let you get back to your questions as well.
Now, I have a question, two questions. You said your jump into sales was very interesting, and could you share any example or a story which comes to your mind to help our viewers?
So
I was an
there's one.
ex-McKinsey and ex-corporate strategy guy and doing frontline sales. How was it? And
So
like any particular incidents or situation?
I'll
And,
tell
and
you a
just to
couple of
add to
incidents
that,
which.
like I know that because when I was looking at LinkedIn, I also had the same observation that you were saying, like, oh, someone goes from senior engagement manager at McKinsey to being an account manager. So of course, I think that parallel is definitely very interesting to explore.
Absolutely. So the way frontline sales in Hilti works is a direct sales job, right? You get a territory, and you are basically selling material into that territory to generate revenue. So I had my territory as San Francisco when I first started off, and there I had a truck full of tools. And in this case, I actually didn't have access to CRM when I started off, for just because transition, my boss wasn't there, and there's no one to go do overlap. So I literally did not know who to go to sell to. So I used to drive on every street. I used to print out the Google Maps, and then identify porta potties which are outside, which indicates there's a construction site there, and they mark it on my map saying, okay, these are all the construction sites which are in the area. And then I should go and walk in and say, what are they trying to build? How are they building? And what could I sell them, right? Can I sell
Just
them
alone
measuring
by
tools?
yourself, or you had like
But
a buddy
by
or
myself,
something? Okay.
alone, all alone. So this is like on my own and trying to experiment, right? Sell, refining my sales strategies, right? Also, if you had to earn their trust, they'll be like, who's this new guy? I don't know him. Why should I buy anything from this person? So it's about showing commitment to some of these days. One of the stories that the guy who followed me relates back to me is like, Indian guy who used to come, he's like so perseverant. So one of these days it's raining and he's carrying this 30 kilo combi hammer and just climbing up the hill a few blocks just to deliver it, because I needed it on site that day and we had no parking. So he remembered that, because that was like, I didn't even remember that instance till my colleague came back and told me. But those are the small things that people remember, that you are delivering things to them when they really need it in times of need, right? And also, you learn small strategies. For example, I learned which kind of donuts that my job site folks like, so that if I take donuts, then I get the meeting with them. I knew which coffee shops they went to before they went to job site. So I used to go to Starbucks at 5:45 in the morning, just so that I can get 15 minutes with these folks, because I wouldn't get it on site.
And who are these folks? Like, are they like the leader of the tradesmen, or are they
So
the
these are
sponsors? Who are these people?
foremen, supervisors on the job site. So they're the people who are actually getting the job done on construction sites.
And they have the purchasing power, like
they have the purchasing power.
Okay, they are decision maker in that case.
It depends on the trade. A lot of them also have an office, so I also had to go to offices, but a lot of them purchase on site as well.
Oh, really?
But this was in the trade I was serving. A lot of them were purchasing on site, and that's why I had to access it.
And which year is that?
This was 2016.
Okay, so not that long ago. Okay, so
yeah, this is 2016.
And can I ask you? It may come across as naive, but me and Akshay have also done, let's say, sales, but not maybe similar. We were selling food or things like that, delivering food to people on our bikes. Did you face any challenges because you were not from there, and also maybe looked a little bit different? But I don't know. 2016 is not that long ago, so maybe San Francisco is still international in that sense, but maybe not the audience you're dealing with.
So the audience basically spoke in Spanish. So we had a lot of most of the construction site folks as either Irish or Mexicans here, in terms of what you do, and they're very nice people. The people they just don't have time, right? They're very but you need to make sure your boots are scuffed. They don't want polished boots. They don't want shiny hard hats. They want to know that you're a person who actually gets it. Proving that you belong takes a little bit of time. And if I don't understand the workflows, if they look at me with fresh shirts and shiny boots and stuff like that, then I don't belong. It's not the color of the skin, but other parts of the appearance which are actually important.
The consultant Vivin was definitely not going to be welcomed as warmly as the sales Vivin was.
Absolutely. And I've been thrown out of job sites because I've shown up during days when I shouldn't show up, and I didn't know what I was doing. But you learn it. You learn to have a little bit of a thick skin, which is a very good skill from a later stage in life.
But at that point in time in your career, what was the underlying driving factor? Like why you wanted to jump in this uncomfortable space? And also maybe now you can look back, it's also not your startup that you are trying to sell something, right? So what was the drive then? Like, and Hilti, I know, is a huge company. So probably you were also not very closer to the Hilti family or something that you relate to them. Like, what was the driving factor then? It's like selling passionately petrol for Ambani's, Like, how did you connect with that mission, or what was the thing? Like,
so if you look at Hilti has about 30,000 employees. 20,000 are in sales, right? It's a product company, but it's much more of a sales company. And if I did not know how to sell, then going to the top would have been more difficult, right? That's the first thing. That's earning your credibility. The fact that you can actually do this is important. I understand it by seeing how it's actually done on job sites. What products we're doing, what is the application, how they're being used, what are the workflows, building relations with customers, going to their office, looking at different projects, and that was very important. And this was like a learning for me more than anything else. I knew that even if I didn't do spectacularly well, I'll be fine, in the sense that Hilti would take care of me and do other things. But I needed to do it, and for me to doing well was important. More from a perspective of this is a skill set that I need to do. And I ended up managing the team as well, right? And that was also a very important experience, because even though I'd managed teams in McKinsey and other places before, managing a sales team is a different skill set in a different geography. So that kind of completed the skill set I had. And today, when I look back at it, those experiences are super powerful, because when I'm looking at a startup, I'm looking at the solutions workflow because I've been there, right? From different angles. And not a lot of people can say that.
Did that role for how long?
The frontline sales, I did about 6 months. Sales manager, I did about 2.5 years. So roughly 2.5, 3 years in all, in terms of being.
I have to say that's quite the long-term thinking, right? We're not talking about like 6 months or like another 6 months. That's almost saying 3 years I'm going to invest in upskilling myself before I actually go on to claim, let's say, my top spot, which in a lot of ways, you come with that entitlement after coming from a consulting background, like consulting firm like McKinsey. So that does sound very impressive.
See, I believe if you do the work, the results will come, right? And and I was having fun. I was having fun. My only thing is, in 6 months, you don't learn enough. You learn a lot, but you're
Mm.
not delivering anything. You're just in the learning. Having 3 years also helped me showcase that I could deliver, right? It's not just that I'd done my learning. I'd also show that I could perform, and that was recognized in the organization. The fact that most people probably did not expect me to succeed in what I did, and everybody is pleasantly surprised on how well I did during those.
You had that. I'm definitely not going to try to pronounce it. You had that favorite Hindi saying, right? And it sounds like this is kind of linked to that. So maybe you want to add a little bit of that flavor here.
Oh, the
So
Karmanyeva Dikaraste, that one.
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
Sanskrit saying, so I'm not going to say that again here. So I'll give you the
Yeah, it
English gist
sounds
of
like
it.
No,
Bala's.
as Indians, we can try once, come on, like.
I got. I will give you the English version because I'll have to go back and read it off script because I so. But what basically it means is focus on the work that you're doing without an expectation of results. And that is what we've been taught from an early age. And as Palla was saying, karmanyavadikaraste. Now, I'll have to read it now. I don't remember the exact words, so I'll have to go back and read it. But the ethos of that is something.
I want to fast forward a bit into the future and point to the fact that you've just raised a $56 million fund. How does it feel? And give us like the behind the scenes of it. What perhaps an interesting story about what went maybe really wrong, what went really right, and how did you go about it? How long did it take? What's the story?
It is super exciting to be able to say that we raised the fund, right? We didn't make it easy for ourselves. Uh, if I had to choose a time in hindsight to start fundraising, March of 2022 would be exactly not the time. When it is a start of a phase which was the worst time for a first time manager to raise in the last 25 years. It's like, and we didn't just say we'll raise at that time. We also said we'll raise from corporates, which are exceedingly difficult to raise from. And we set a fund size which is unusual for first time managers who haven't really worked in a financial VC before, right? So we added so many complexities and we told them, okay, it'll be in a sector that you haven't really heard much about. It will be a global. So we pretty much breaking all rules possible. And so it wasn't easy, and honestly, I never thought of myself as someone who's going to be an entrepreneur. I was like this corporate guy, very good at following rules, very good at executing. You give me something, I will get that done. So I never thought I'll be passionate enough to just jump into something. Because I've known the industry for so long, I know the issues that exist, and we did this at Hilti. I know the frustrations which exist. We invested in funds. We know what works well, what doesn't work well. So the understanding and the passion about this topic was very high. So literally, when I was leaving Hilti, they'll be like, oh, "Why don't you stay back?" And they tried a couple of times to ask me not to go, but I was like, "I'll give you as long as you want, but I'm not leaving for a competitor. I'm leaving because I want to start something on my own. And maybe I don't do well at that time. There's no clarity that will actually raise funds, right? So I left Hilti without us having raised $1, and this was end of 2021. And for 6 months, I didn't take $1 in salary then. So this was like going from a really secure kind of job where you have a clear path to grow in the organization to taking a complete risk in the unknown and not drawing salary. And it was challenging. I would say it was not straightforward. And there were times where we were like, will we actually get this done? Because your fundraising goes in tranches, right? We start raising a small fund. We have a first close. First close happened March-ish of 2022. And then you start raising. And there's a period from March to September of 2022 when fundraising was really, really slow. So it was hard to get any traction because the markets have completely collapsed. And it was not just true for us. It was even some of the financials who we're discussing with, who said, okay, maybe we could invest in your fund, they were not raising funds and they could not deploy. And it was not the most straightforward process. But we kept plugging, we kept getting small wins. And by September, we had reached the size where we said, okay, it was 3 founders. It was me and Mauricio and Juan, the 3 founders who were there. And we said, we can make it work. We can go lean and we can still make it work. The startups that we invested, we're getting traction. Our early backers, we're seeing that we understood the space, we're making the right bets. And we started getting some traction, and that word started spreading. So from September to say December, January, we started to get a little bit more traction, and we started getting to the baseline. So when we modeled the fund, we said 35 million is a baseline. If the market is bad, we can survive with 25. If we are really optimistic, we raise 50. So we're like, and our financials were initially based on 25 because we're not sure we cross that. And slowly during the year, we said we step it up to 35 because it got closer and closer to the market, so we could change the strategy as well. And something clicked first quarter of last year, and there everything accelerated because we had this buzz in the market. We'd been out for like 8 to 12 months. People are seeing what we're doing, and then in 6 months we just raised $25 million. It was like just completely accelerated by September we're mostly done last year. So it took us about 18 months to go through the process. We ended up at 56, which is actually much higher than what we thought we would end at. We got some really good backers, and we have presence all across the world. Now we have 8 people on the team, so we have grown the team as well. And all of our startups are doing really well. Most of them have raised follow-on funding, especially the ones from 2022. It's now we are recognized as one of the better VCs in the space, and that shows in the deals that we win as well. So we win highly competitive deals, and so it feels good to be in a place where it feels like a real company. It feels like, yes, we actually have built something now. Coming from the first 6-8 months where we're like, we never thought of finding another job, but that's always something in the back of your mind saying, okay, what if this doesn't work out, right? But then nothing happens if you don't take a chance.
So how does for people to know, how does the fundraising process works for a VC? So is it similar to how a startup is raising funds and then they come up with the rationale and the storyline of why one should invest in their startup or business? Is it kind of similar, or there's some things which are very different? How does one go about raising these funds?
There's some things which are similar, but some things which are very different, right? You do want to invest in a product and saying, okay, there has to be a thesis around why you're investing in this space, right? But there are also lots of differences in the sense that a startup is raising for a particular milestone. In terms of, say, seed or Series A, they'll say, I'm raising $5 million to go from step A to step B. All right. They have a very clear product in terms of saying, okay, I'm building a robotics company to solve this problem, or I'm building a software to solve this problem. VC is much more hazy. When you're raising for VC, you're raising for the fund. The fund has a 10-year life cycle. You're not, and the check sizes tend to be larger. For example, when we raise 56 million, we're not calling all that 56 million. We call capital as in when we deploy capital. So it's a commitment that you're giving to the fund that will be deployed over 3-5 years or whatever the time frame is. But then you don't have a lot of control over what they're investing on. VCs have theses and all of that, but it's a little bit of blind faith in terms of the people that you're investing in, because it's a 10-year commitment. You're not getting a payoff immediately. Your payoff starts happening from year 6 or year 7. So 1, it's much larger. 2, it is a little bit more illiquid. 3, the product is not as clearly defined as a startup product is defined. And that's why convincing people is a lot harder sometimes for VCs as compared to startups. And the fundraising process typically for a VC can last 18 months. 18 is the norm. For startups, it's like 3 months or 4 months, and you come back and do it 3 years again. So there are a few different things between VC fundraising and startup fundraising.
You initially thought that 25, 35, and 50 optimistic. You ended up at 56. What's the logic behind 56? Like, you could have gone 60, 65 as well, right? When do you really decide that, okay, let's...
So we decided to close it around September, right?
Mm.
We, except with one or two small exceptions, we just didn't
Mhm.
want to endlessly fundraise because there's a lot of time capacity. As
Right.
we see, uh, we need to be working with our startups that we invested in. So if you're just putting in money, that's not helpful enough. We need to be helpful to our startups. We need to de-risk them, help them with GTM, help them with customer introductions, their product strategy, and a lot of other things, right? That takes capacity. We are on multiple boards. So if you're continuing to fundraise all the time, that takes capacity from us. So it's mostly a timing issue than anything else. And also, if it's too big, your strategy also starts to shift. Right now, it won't
Right.
shift for us because it's fairly clearly defined. We could have gone to 75, 80 without really changing our strategy much. But it's mostly from a time constraint perspective. We did not want to distract ourselves from deal flow and portfolio support and even LP investor support to some extent.
Moment that you can recollect, which was really like really the high moment or like a really low moment as part of this process?
So the high moment was probably when we won our first deal.
Mhm.
This was it's a company called Document Crunch, and Josh this year and I are close friends now. So we didn't even have a first close then, right? So, and this was a startup which are like one startup of the year at like two or three different competitions. So we really liked the startup. Josh is a phenomenal CEO. They had interest from a bunch of VCs and all of that, right? And we literally did not even announce a first close before then. So we are known in the ecosystem as people who've done venture and corporate venture, but the course not really known.
And when you
So
say
I
we don't
literally,
have a first close, in a simpler term, you basically didn't have the money what you were
it's
trying to invest. That's a
exactly. So
simpler way of
it
understanding.
was not in the bank. We didn't really have money in
Yeah.
the bank. It was some commitments that we could talk about, but not real money that we had.
That
So
definitely
to the
sounds
extent,
like a startup, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And there's literally a clause in a term sheet closure agreement where they had basically said this is contingent on you closing, doing a first close by this time. And we are like, yeah, there's pressure on us also to deliver. But the fact that we won that when they had multiple term sheets, and that has gone so well over the last couple of years, that was a big high. That was like, yes, we can win deals in this space, even when
But
we
what
don't have a
what
lot to
stood
show.
out? Is there anything particular that you can say that that's why it worked, even when
Uh,
with all of the other so much
three, th-
interest?
three things. One, we spent a lot of time diligencing them and showcasing them on what are views on where they can go. We shared that explicitly with them. Say, these are the risks, this is where we could help you, and this is where we could advance. Two, our personal brands are fairly strong in the industry.
Mm.
So the references that they got was fairly strong. And also the personal touch. I literally flew down from San Francisco to Atlanta to hand him the term sheet in person when I had literally nothing else to do in Atlanta that day. So he's like, yeah, this
Mhm.
person cares. He really cares about what we're trying to do. And that's something he was looking for. And he still quotes that story to this day saying, Vivin just calls me and said he wants to catch up for coffee. Then I realized he's actually thrown down to give me the term sheet. So that is important to him. And I think those are things that helped us clinch the deal.
And just a little bit back in
Mhm.
how do co-founders, right?
So yeah, two co-founders. So we had invested in a fund called Brick and Mortar back in the days. So Cemex had invested in the same fund. So we are LPs and we interacted with each other. So we used to share deal flows. We used to meet each other for a consistent period of time.
This is
And
during your
then
Hilti time.
this is during my
Mhm.
Hilti time. And Hilti joined a construction startup competition that Cemex had organized. So we also got interactions there. And eventually we did an acquisition where Cemex was an investor. So we had multiple touch points and we'd become good friends over a period of time. We'd known each other for 3-4 years before we actually launched the fund. So this is something that came about seamlessly. And all of us were in similar stages of our journey from a career perspective, and our philosophies matched, and it's been great. Juan and Mauricio both have been fantastic partners in the last couple of years.
And where did the seed of this idea came? Like that you would want to start something of your own, but not like a traditional startup, but like a VC as a startup? Where did that idea come from?
So in two ways. One, from a Hilti experience, there's a lot of frustration in terms of the admin processes that are involved, right? While we love the venture part of it, the admin part of it, and the restrictions that existed, were not something we are very happy about, and that is something we want to change. And setting something up on your own helps you do that. And two, from Mao and Juan as well. They had their own ideas when Cemex was investing. There's an idea of setting up something independent with more partners coming together. So when they approached me saying this is what we have in mind, it kind of fit from a perspective of saying it makes complete sense. Skill sets are mutually beneficial. Coverage is mutually beneficial, and setting up something like this would be amazing.
And of course, right now we want to also get to the part of the fact that you are not doing this in India. You are doing this in a completely different country where, yes, you're now based there for a few years, but as entrepreneurs ourselves here as well, like how difficult it can be to not have so much of your network, so much of your friends around you to support you and then kind of like help you move on that journey a lot faster. So where did you get that support from? Like, and was it difficult? And how do you feel about it, like doing it there versus, let's say, contrast it to doing it in India?
India is home, right? When you come back, everything is natural. You understand the culture, you understand the workflows,
Exactly.
and so on and so forth. But what has helped here is there's a strong immigrant community. A lot of my college friends, engineering friends, are here in the Bay Area. So that support is very helpful. Also, the ability to integrate here is faster than I think most other parts in the world, because you have that culture of acceptance. And the Bay Area that way has been extremely welcoming, especially when I was coming in. The willingness of people to share in terms of what is happening or what are the structures, how to think about it, the willingness of people to open up their networks has been exceedingly high. And that's why it's been amazing. In terms of setting up something, this is a great place to do it. And also, my experience of living in so many different places kind of prepped me in terms of being adaptive to new geographies and stuff like that. And that's also helped. But also, when I go back to India, I I still go back to India at least a couple of times a year, and I want to help engage with the Indian content ecosystem and accelerate that. So, work with C-Tribe and the Construction Tech Alliance of India. I'll be there for the Construction Technology Day later this year. So I do want to make sure I stay close to the India ecosystem. But as you said, building it in a different geography is non-trivial. But you do leverage the relationships that you've built over a period of time.
And you have also lived in Switzerland, right? So that was
Yes,
Zurich or somewhere else,
St. Gallen,
Argao or something.
St. Gallen, close to Argau, not very
St.
far.
Gallen, yeah.
So
Okay,
it's on the border. It's in German
that's
border.
where the Hilti headquarters is, right? Or one of the headquarters, I think.
So Hilti headquarters is in Liechtenstein, and I used to drive from St. Gallen to Liechtenstein every day. So I was basically doing cross-border commute for a
yeah.
couple of years.
So you, in terms of long-term stay, you stayed in Switzerland and then in US.
Yes, Switzerland and US.
Yeah.
I would say Africa was also long term in terms of I literally didn't go back to India for a year. I was there for a full year in Africa. Actually, moving base was Switzerland and US.
Yeah. And because I or Akshay have not spent time personally in San Francisco or let's say the New York ecosystem or the Chicago ecosystem, but we
Mm-hmm.
often hear stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you are there in the one of the biggest startup ecosystems in the world. Have you tried to reflect, or maybe if you can verbalize what differences are there? Like, why is it the biggest? I understand the market size and access to the biggest market, which is US. But
Mm-hmm.
in addition to that, what are the other things which are playing in favor of it to still maintain it as the biggest ecosystem in the world?
So three or four things. One is if you look at the ecosystems, you always need a talent base, right? So the fact that Stanford, UC Berkeley are here in the Bay, or UCSF is here in the Bay is very helpful. The fact that Harvard, MIT, Colombia on the East Coast, where the hubs are, is very helpful because you have a talent base, which gives you people, but it also gives you research and so on and so forth. That's the first thing. The second is the institutionalized learning. Because there have been generations of entrepreneurs here and generations of VCs here, that base knowledge that you get is very, very high. So you don't have to learn and build that from scratch. Automatically, when you're plugged into this ecosystem, a lot of problems are solved for you because that learning, you can go and talk to someone, right? Also, the third is the openness. Valley is very open in terms of people will give you time and tell you everything that you have to say, because people don't think of IP as protection. People think of pace of innovation as your differentiation. And your pace of innovation only works if you're getting new ideas and sharing them and continuing to iterate over a period of time. And that's what's driven a lot of this, right? And that's happened over decades and decades. And that's very hard to replicate in a market in a near term, right? Over a period of time, you can actually build that. And there are new hubs coming in. It's much more distributed today than it was. And there's smart people everywhere. But that institutional knowledge that exists just gives you a leg up. So if I were to start a company, I would start in the Bay, right? Even though it's very expensive, I would still start in the Bay. When you scale it, whether you stay in the Bay or go elsewhere is a different question because cost is quite expensive right now.
Yeah.
But from a starting perspective, this is still the best place to start a company.
Hear about your India connection and also a bit about you want to give back to the community back home, and you're connected there. Is it in the current context that you would say are your driving factors? What would you say is Vivin's purpose at the moment? What is it that really gets you going?
So purpose is a very difficult question, in the sense that yes, I get up in the morning because I'm excited about making a change in the world, right? And today there are problems which need to be solved. Climate is one of them, right? Climate, from a perspective of decarbonizing our environment, is extremely important because if we don't do it, then we're leaving the world in a worse place for our future generations, and the time is now to act on. So that's one area where I want to make change, and I want to make change from a position of us being able to influence it, right? For example, in the construction space, we know this space and we can actually look at topics where we can actually drive this forward, and that's important. And the second is topics like infrastructure, right? So I really believe that foundations are very important for you to build good homes. Foundations are important for people to have established lives, and processes are important, which means infrastructure needs to be there. Whether it is infrastructure in terms of roads and bridges and dams, whether it's infrastructure about people having homes to live in, because that makes a significant difference in quality of lives. For example, there have been studies of home ownership versus people's wealth, right? When people start owning homes, the trajectory of their wealth ownership changes significantly. And how can you make this more accessible to people? So that's what drives me in terms of making sure, one, everything is more efficient and affordable, and two, it is sustainable. And talking about the India connection, India is where I grew up. It's given me most of what I have in terms of education, in terms of learning, skill sets, and all of that. And it does, yeah, I can't think of a reason why I wouldn't contribute back, because that's like home. So I want to do everything I can do to push us forward, because the macro story for India is incredible, and it needs everybody to be pulling the same direction to keep it going.
And I would like to switch gears a little bit. We didn't talk about family, like your family. You said by the time you were moving to Chicago the first time, you also got married. So could you throw some more light on that if you want? Like, how did you find your partner? Who is your partner? And how she has supported you over these years or decades in your professional journey as well, which involved moving from different geographies, leaps of faith?
She's been amazing. Her name is Kanishka. She basically works in research in UCSF. She is in the medical profession. She's a program manager there and works in the neurology department. And she's been wonderful in the sense that she's seen me at McKinsey, she's seen me at Hilti, she's seen me doing this. I have a crazy lifestyle. I travel too much. I work crazy hours, and she's been through all of it, right? And now we have a 10-month-old. So with a baby growing up at home, thank you. For me, prioritization is very important. It's important that I spend time with Shaurya. It's important that I spend time at home. But I'm also building a startup. It's never going to be where
also like a baby.
Yes, it is like a baby, and a baby which has a lot of demands, right? And especially having global teams, having different time zones, things are not easy. And there, she's like a sponge. She soaks it all up. She's been a huge support, and she's been with me in Chicago, Switzerland, here, India, all these places, right? So, and that's what keeps the family together. It's important to have support at home to make this work. And she's also helped me learn a lot of things. I was a lot more geeky back in the days, and she's made me probably a little bit more polished than I was.
And what do you mean by that exactly in this like relationship context? Like you were geeky. Could you want to elaborate?
When I say I'm geeky, I'm like one of those engineers who comes out of India, very good quantitatively, very good from a content perspective, but not so great from a social perspective. So she's helped me become a more rounded personality from a social perspective. She also comes from an army background. Her dad's a brigadier and stuff. So she knows she knows how to be more polished. Let me just leave it at that. And she's set high bars for me as well, which I try to keep up to.
It almost no, I was saying it almost looks like on paper that you were the one who is achieving things and going to all these continents and Switzerland and Africa and Chicago. So, but the powerhouse in the back is your wife. Is that like, what do you mean? Like,
I can drive the content discussion, right? She just makes it more polished so that it just makes it more complete, right?
I think we need an example of that. Is that something you have any particular incident that comes to mind which has some, let's say, some interesting fact to it?
And we say this because we've realized doing the podcast as well that we not only our audience and also us are interested in just talking about somebody's professional journey, but also naturally when we are talking of an immigrant podcast, the family becomes also important because you may meet someone who's from some other country and those kind of challenges, or may not meet someone. I mean, may travel places with your partner like you did. So I think it's also quite important and interesting for our audience.
So I'll give you 2 or 3 examples. One is about being more perceptive. So growing up, yes, I would think of myself as perceptive, but when I'm in conversations with other people, and I would take people at face value a lot of times. I'm like, yeah, they said this, and I react like this, and that's fine. So I say what I think, and I expect everybody to say what I think. And she would, after the conversation, come back and say, they said this, but this is actually what they meant, and this is what their body language showcased. So it helped me start understand cues and body language and everything else better, which helps you plan and react better in the future. Growing up, things like dressing, right? She's like, what you wear is atrocious. Your color combinations are awful. You don't know how to dress up properly. And she basically made sure that I'm adequately present. She's like, you're professional and executive. You need to dress like one. You want to present like one. Every part of my apparel, backpack, wallet. So she pays attention to detail, and I'm like, okay, I need to learn. And once I learn, then I can replicate it. I can execute it. But she helped me with learning all of this, whether it's in a social context, how I present myself, all of these things. She's been very helpful. And she also takes care of planning and thinking through stuff when we're organizing and all of that. And that's also something that's been very helpful.
And what age did you guys get married? It kind of sounds a bit, you were like very young, or
I was 27 when I got married, and she's a little
towards the
younger than.
younger side, I would
Yeah,
say,
yeah.
or in today's context. Okay. And
But
she's same age?
She's a little younger. She's 3 years younger than me. It was kind of coincidence. So I was still in India back in those days, but I was visiting New York. So I was doing road trips, and I happened to go to New York to visit one of my friends, and she was there visiting her sister at the same time. She was also based in India, but she happened to be in New York. And my friend was married to her sister. My classmate from school was married to her sister.
Okay.
And for some reason, her sister didn't have time that weekend. And she was like, go hang out with these guys. They're like geeky, harmless guys. And we only spent a couple of days in New York, and it
not
was
so
always
harmless
in a
at the
group.
end.
Yeah, that's what she says now. So it was only a couple of days that we spent, but we kept in touch. We came back, we interacted over a period of time, and most of it was long distance. This was also when I moved to Jakarta. And Jakarta was a particularly intense project. I used to be at office from 8 till 2 a.m. in the morning. At 2 a.m., I used to come back, and then I used to call her, and we used to be on this phone from, say, 2:15 to 3:30. And as to be back, as to be up again at 7, that set very wrong expectations. So she's like, when we're dating, you slept for 3-4 hours and you managed perfectly fine, and now you need 6 hours of sleep. What's wrong with you? So for anyone who's dating, just make sure your expectation setting is managed, because it has consequences later on.
And also then in India, I think a lot of middle class men grew up with this sort of Bollywood fantasy, you're sending, white dove with the rose and letter and talking and not sleeping and not eating. It's a very Bollywoody expectation, which is setting, which at least in my generation, that's how a lot of people grew up,
Yeah, so expectation management is very important.
So it was like a love marriage then, yeah? That's
It
what
was.
people thought.
She's from the north, I'm from the south, so we had to then convince our families as well, which was interesting, but we managed that.
And one thing I want to ask, which is not related to this, and maybe related to your designation of your father-in-law, you qualified NDA as well. And I've attended NDA SSB a couple of times. I didn't qualify, by the way, but I am familiar with that space, and I've met a few people who either didn't go or went but had a medical injury. They had to opt out, and then they completely are different people now in terms of what they appear to be. How did that play a role, or is that because you need a certain mindset to go for NDA? So I'm just curious, what was that story? And coming back to the present, do you carry that NDA spirit now in your life?
The context for NDA was, this was just after Kargil war, right? So when I was applying it, it was just after the Kargil war. So you're emotionally charged, and I was always a guy who had a lot of respect for the armed forces. Everything that they did was something that appealed to me, and it was discipline. So discipline was very important in my life, especially early in those days. That's when I was going from being a happy-go-lucky guy to being focused and wanting to deliver. This was during my 11th and 12th. I used to be up at 4 a.m. every day, just because I was studying and I was training and I was doing all of this.
Or NDA?
No, it was not just NDA. I was also studying and preparing for education and all of that.
Okay.
Because I lived in a remote village, going to school, going to college was like 45 minutes. Coming back was 45 minutes. I had to go to tuitions, I had to go to other things, and then I had to fit this NDA and other things in it. And that's why discipline was very important, and the armed forces had high respect for me. So for me, NDA was the pinnacle of joining the armed forces, because it's special forces. And that's why I went through the process. And I even missed my preparatory exams to actually go to the NDA camp and do the SSB and come back. And I was like ecstatic when I actually got through. The experience itself taught me much more of discipline, taught me the environment they operate in, and so on. And I had completely made up my mind to go there. But eventually my parents were like, akela beta, and all my relatives pressurized me in saying,
You're the only child?
I, okay, I'm not the only child, but I'm the only son,
Listen.
and I have a sister. Sister was already married by then. Not married, she was about to be married. She's older than me. And then mom got a lot of pressure, and eventually, fortunately, unfortunately, I had given the REC exam, and I got really good marks, and I got admission into one of the top universities there. And they're like, if you're able to do this, why don't you actually go there instead of going there? And I was like, if it was just one or two people, I would have probably insisted that I go. But if everybody is like saying this, and then I don't want to break everybody's hearts and go. And that's why I ended up staying,
Do
because
you
this
miss
university is
it?
also close.
Or maybe not now, but maybe in the beginning of your other career, did you look back or did you thought about what if it would have been different?
So I do think back and say how life would have been different. Uh, but I can't complain the way the life has gone, because even in Surathkal, it's a great year. I was the student union president there, and I I had learned a lot. I learned a lot in terms of organization, making friends, and going in different directions and so on and so forth. I think life would have been different.
I'm also from NIT Nagpur,
Ah,
the
nice.
VRC. Yeah.
So we have a lot of common history.
Yeah, yeah. I understand the NIT culture better. Yeah.
Nation is like NIT, IIM. Yeah, that's always, and that's, I think, quite makes the conversation. It almost feels supernatural while we are having it. Like that's been almost like, and that's particularly for like this is the first time we are actually talking to each other outside of all of
Yeah.
the conversations
Yeah.
that we've had on from my side. Of course, and still being going back to the topic of family, of course, we talked about your wife, but what do you think about the how your life going forward is going to change with, and it probably has already changed in the last 10 months, but how do you see that and your profession kind of together with the uh,
and 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 parents as well, because I think you said you have a sister, but you are the son and your parents probably are in India. How do you see all those things dynamics playing out?
So parents are based in India, but right now they're here because the baby is here, so they're spending time with the grandchild. So dad actually just came yesterday, and mom's and my sister lives in Seattle. So for them to come to the US is very
Oh,
helpful,
okay.
because they get
okay.
to meet all the grandkids and stuff.
That helps. Yeah.
Uh, it does definitely helps. And from a future perspective, one thing that's changed and will continue to change is level of prioritization. For example, I don't have the flexibility on just saying I'll go for a week to the East Coast and just do all meetings and come. And now it has to be much more efficient. Even if I'm going to New York, it's like 2 days. Just pack everything and be very, very mindful of your time. Every second is precious, because every second I'm doing something else, I'm not spending it to Shaurya. So that is something you have to think about. So that level of prioritization has changed a lot, and that will continue to change, because my travel is pretty intense. I would like it to be less intense, and figuring out ways to do that as well. But some of it is necessary, right? Zacua is also young, right? So I can't give short shift to any one of them, and that's why it's important to balance that. I do work very long hours right now, so eventually things will stabilize. So hopefully it'll not be as long, but it's something that's a constant battle, something that you have to keep working on. And there are times when you think about, okay, I'm juggling so many balls, two of them have to drop off. So I have to choose which one drops off consciously and be okay with that. In the past, I would never be okay with that, but now I recognize that it's better for me to choose which ones to drop rather than them dropping by themselves, because then the most important ones might drop.
What's your overall schedule usually like? How does a day in the life of women look like at the moment?
Start my
What time do
day,
you
my
get
calls.
up? What's like your schedule?
I get up around 6 in the morning. I have calls starting at 6:37 in the morning. So mostly it's backed up. During the day, till 5-ish, usually it's back. And then I won't have any breaks. I try to, by 5:30, I try to get a break, because I need time with Shaurya. She has to take a shower and go to sleep. By 7:30ish, she goes to sleep. Then have dinner, and by 9 I get back to work. And I'm usually up till 12, 12:30, maybe sometimes 1, getting stuff done. Then go to bed. That's how.
And do you get time for yourself in the sense, what do you do to recharge yourself?
I need to do that more. So just this week I decided maybe after Shaurya goes to sleep, I should go to the gym at maybe 7:30, 7:45 and go there for an hour. I play in a league, cricket league here.
Oh, nice.
In the US. Or at least I used to till about 8 months back. Now I haven't been as often. It's only been 3-4 times in the last few months. But I need to want to restart that as well. But that's a time commitment. So if I'm traveling so much, I can't also be playing cricket on weekends. So maybe this weekend I'll go though. So it's some of the things that I'm still figuring out, trying to balance that.
And I think I have to say that in our conversation, I really enjoyed as well as like the breadth of all the things that you've done, and also like the depth that you've gone into like your one sector and really nailed it down. And it has truly been a very enriching experience having this conversation. So I wanted to say a big thank you for taking out the time from.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
It almost doesn't feel like that we are that far away. It feels like we might meet for a coffee later or something.
I do want to come to Amsterdam. 2 of my cousins actually stay in Utrecht and close by.
Oh,
so,
sure. Please let us know.
I do want to come there sometime. I'll give you a shot. Maybe we do catch up on that coffee sometime.
Sure, yeah.
Sounds like a plan.
Thanks a lot. Yeah.
And we can play cricket if you're into it.
Sure, yeah.
It's our birthright, right? Like there's like you cannot live on it.
True. Great chatting with you guys. You take care.